The sketch was working. Jonathan Winters playing a bumbling detective, Dean Martin as the suspect. Audience laughing, cameras rolling, everything smooth. Then, Winters wrapped Dean in what looked like a comedic bear hug, and something changed in Dean's face. The smile stayed, but his eyes shifted. Something had just been said, something nobody else heard. What happened in the next 4 minutes would show America why Dean Martin was more than just an entertainer, and why true friendship sometimes means saving someone while millions watch and have no idea what's really happening. The Dean Martin Show knew how to use Jonathan Winters: book him, give him a basic premise, then let him improvise. That was the formula. Winters was comedy chaos, unpredictable genius, the kind of performer who could take a simple sketch about buying a car and turn it into 8 minutes of brilliance nobody saw coming. Audiences loved him. Dean loved working with him. It was high-wire entertainment without a net. But there was something Dean knew that most people didn't. Something Winters had told him years earlier, during a quiet moment after a show, when the crowd was gone and only two professionals remained, speaking honestly. Jonathan Winters struggled, not with comedy, with his mind. The brilliant improvisation that made him famous, the ability to become 12 different characters in 3 minutes, the manic energy that audiences found hilarious, it all came from the same place as the darkness he fought privately. The line between genius and chaos was thinner for him than most people understood. Winters had been hospitalized before. It wasn't a secret in the industry, though the public knew less about it. He'd been open with close friends about his battles with what doctors then called nervous breakdowns, what would later be understood as bipolar disorder. Some nights he could ride the wave of his own mind. Other nights it rode him. And the terrifying part was never knowing which kind of night it would be until he was already on stage. Dean understood this in a way most people didn't, not because he struggled the same way, but because he paid attention. He watched people. He noticed when someone's laugh sounded different, when their energy shifted, when the performance became a shield instead of an expression. And he'd seen Winters on good nights and hard nights, and he'd learned to recognize the difference. Tonight's taping started normal. Studio full, 320 people who'd waited months for tickets. Band tight, every musician knowing their cues. Lighting perfect, Dean in his element. That effortless charisma that made hosting look like a conversation with friends. The opening monologue landed exactly as it should. The musical guest killed their performance. Everything running on schedule. Everyone doing their job. Just another successful Thursday night. Winters was in his dressing room warming up, running through character voices, getting into the zone the way he always did. The stage manager who knocked to give him his 10-minute call later said Winters seemed fine, focused, maybe a little more energetic than usual, but that was normal for Winters before a performance. The man ran hot. When the stage manager asked if he needed anything, Winters gave a thumbs up, ready to go. Showtime. The sketch setup was simple. Dean playing a wealthy businessman accused of stealing his own painting for insurance money. Winters as the detective sent to investigate. Basic premise. Room for Winters to go anywhere he wanted. That was the whole point. Winters walked onto the set and immediately owned it. He started inspecting props that weren't part of the sketch, picking up a telephone, examining it like evidence, delivering a monologue about how criminals always forget to check the phone records. The audience was already laughing. Dean watched him work, staying out of the way, feeding him straight lines when needed. 3 minutes in, Winters found a fake plant on the set and launched into an interrogation of it. "You've been here the whole time, haven't you? You saw everything." The absurdity landed perfectly. The audience howled. Dean played along, apologizing to Winters for not introducing him to Mr. Ficus earlier. Pure comedy chemistry, the kind of moment that made live television magic. But something was shifting beneath the surface. Dean noticed it first because he was watching for it. He learned to watch for it with Winters. The energy was accelerating. Not the good kind of acceleration where a comedian finds a rhythm and rides it. The unstable kind. The kind that looks like enthusiasm to an audience, but feels like panic to someone who knows what to look for. Winter's laugh lines were still landing. The audience was still responding, but the timing was off. The bits were coming faster, more frantic, bleeding into each other without the natural breathing space that made comedy work. Dean stepped into a line, trying to slow the pace down, trying to give Winters a moment to reset. "Detective, maybe we should—" Winters cut him off with another bit, then immediately abandoned that bit for another, then another. The audience was still laughing because they were primed to laugh at anything Winters did, his reputation preceding him. But Dean could feel it, could feel the performance tilting, not obviously, not in a way that would read on camera or register with viewers at home, but tilting nonetheless. Winters did a pratfall, throwing himself onto the floor in an exaggerated collapse. The audience loved it. Physical comedy always landed. But when he stood back up, Dean saw his face for a split second between the comedy masks, between the characters Winters was cycling through. Something was wrong. The eyes were different, panicked, desperate, like Winters was watching himself perform from outside himself and couldn't find the way back in, couldn't remember how to stop, couldn't locate the off switch that would let him just be a person instead of a performing machine. Dean made a choice. He stepped deeper into the scene, physically moving closer to Winters, grounding the sketch. "Detective Winters," Dean said, his voice calm, authoritative. "I think we should discuss this privately." It was an improv line that could go anywhere, an exit strategy dressed as comedy. Winters could take it or ignore it. For a moment, Winters kept spiraling, launching into another character voice. Then he stopped mid-sentence, looked at Dean, really looked at him. That's when Winters moved toward Dean and pulled him into what looked like a comedic embrace. To the audience, it was physical comedy. Two characters in an absurd moment. The cameras captured it, the audience laughed. But in that embrace, with his face hidden from the cameras, Jonathan Winters whispered something into Dean Martin's ear. "I'm losing it." 3 words, barely audible, but Dean heard them, and his entire body language changed. Not obviously, the smile stayed, the performance continued, but his energy shifted from entertainer to protector in an instant. Dean pulled back from the embrace, staying in character. "Detective, I think you've had a long day. Why don't we take a break and reconvene?" He said it with a comedic tone, but his hand stayed on Winters' shoulder, steady, grounding. Winters nodded, still trying to perform, but the engine was flooding. He attempted another joke, but it came out disconnected. The audience laughed anyway because they were primed to laugh at anything Winters did, but Dean could feel it unraveling. "Cut to commercial," Dean said, looking directly at camera 1, breaking the fourth wall smoothly. "We'll be right back after these messages." It wasn't in the script, but it sounded natural enough that the director took the cue and cut. The red lights went off. The audience applauded, thinking it was a planned break. Winters stood there, frozen, mask completely gone. Dean kept his hand on Winters' shoulder and guided him offset. Not rushed, not dramatic, just 2 guys walking off stage together. Backstage was immediate chaos. The producer appeared. "What happened? We've got 3 minutes of show left. Is he okay?" Dean didn't stop walking. 5 minutes. "Dean, we're live. We can't just—" 5 minutes. Dean's voice wasn't loud, but it was final. He kept Winters moving toward his dressing room. They got inside, and Dean closed the door. Winters collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. Not crying, just shutting down. The manic energy completely drained. "I'm sorry," Winters said quietly. "I couldn't hold it. I tried." Dean sat next to him, didn't say anything for a moment, just sat there, present. Finally, "What do you need?" "I don't know." Winters' voice was flat. "I was fine in the dressing room. I was ready, then I got out there and it just started happening. Everything too fast, too loud. I couldn't find the ground." Dean nodded. He'd seen versions of this before. Different manifestations, same core struggle. "You don't have to go back out there," Dean said. "I can finish the show solo. Nobody needs to know anything." Winters shook his head. "They'll know. It'll be a thing. Questions, rumors." "Let them ask," Dean said simply. "Your health is more important than the show." Easy for you to say, Winters said, not meanly, just stating a fact. I'm the Dean Martin. You can do anything. I'm the comedy guy. If people think I actually lost it, that's my career. Dean was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something Winters would remember for the rest of his life. You didn't lose it. You recognized you needed help and you asked for it. That's not losing it. That's the sanest thing you could have done. Winters looked at him. I whispered for help on live television. And I heard you, Dean said. That's what matters. There was a knock on the door. The stage manager. 2 minutes, Mr. Martin. Dean stood up, looked at Winters. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going back out there. I'm going to tell them you weren't feeling well and we're cutting the sketch short. Medical thing, nothing dramatic. Then I'll close the show. You stay here, rest, nobody bothers you. Winters started to protest, but Dean cut him off. This is non-negotiable. You asked for help. I'm helping. This is what that looks like. Dean walked to the door, paused, turned back. Jonathan, you're one of the most talented people I know, but talent doesn't mean you have to destroy yourself to prove it. Take care of yourself. Everything else can wait. Dean walked back onto the stage. The audience applauded. He moved to center stage, that famous, easy smile back in place. Folks, I need to tell you something. Jonathan Winters wasn't feeling well. We're going to cut tonight's sketch short. He's okay, just needs some rest. You know how it is. Sometimes your body tells you to slow down and you have to listen. He said it casually, like it was no big deal, no drama, no speculation, just a fact. Then he pivoted smoothly into closing the show. Thanked the guests, thanked the audience, made a joke about hoping everyone's week goes better than Detective Winters' investigation, got a laugh, signed off. The credits rolled. The audience filed out. Dean walked straight back to Winters' dressing room, knocked once, opened the door. Winters was still on the couch, but he looked steadier, more present. Thank you, Winters said. Nothing to thank me for, Dean said. You would have done the same. Would I? Winters asked, genuinely uncertain. Yes, Dean said firmly, because that's who you are when it counts. What happened that night stayed quiet for years. Winters didn't talk about it publicly during his lifetime. Dean never mentioned it in interviews, never used it as an anecdote about his own character or his friendship with Winters. It wasn't a story to him. It was just something that happened between friends. The show aired with the shortened sketch and casual explanation, and nobody in the viewing audience thought much of it. Just one of those nights where things didn't go exactly as planned. Technical difficulties, performer not feeling well. It happens. But in the community of performers who knew both men, who worked in the same studios and attended the same industry parties and understood the pressures of performing while fighting your own mind, the story eventually spread, not as gossip, not as scandal, as an example. Dean Martin had recognized a friend in crisis, responded instantly without hesitation, protected him publicly without making it obvious, and never leveraged it as a story to tell about his own goodness. That kind of discretion was rare. The entertainment industry ran on stories, on who did what and when and why, but Dean kept this one private. When people asked him about working with Winters, he'd talk about the comedy genius, the improvisation, the joy of watching someone that talented work. He never mentioned the hard nights, the struggle, the whispered plea for help. Years later, after both men had retired from the spotlight and the urgency of career and image had faded, Winters did talk about it, not in detail, not in a tell-all interview, just mentioned during a conversation about mental health in the entertainment industry that Dean Martin once saved him on live television in a way that nobody watching would have ever noticed. When the interviewer pressed for specifics, asked what exactly happened, Winters would just shake his head and say, "He heard me when I needed to be heard. He showed up when I was disappearing. That's all that matters. That's everything." The interviewer pushed, wanted the dramatic details, the specific words, the behind-the-scenes story that would make compelling television, but Winters wouldn't give it. Some things, he said, were more important as private truths than public stories. Dean had protected him then. Winters would protect that moment now. For Dean, it was never a story worth telling. It was just what you did when someone you cared about needed help. You showed up. You listened. You protected them from the spotlight that could burn as easily as it could illuminate. whether it was on stage in front of millions or in a quiet room where nobody would ever know. The audience size didn't change the obligation to actually see people, to hear what they were really saying beneath what they were performing. The lesson of that night wasn't about comedy or entertainment or mental health specifically. It was about presence, about paying attention to people even when everyone else is watching the performance, about recognizing when someone is asking for help in whatever way they can manage. Jonathan Winters kept performing, kept creating, kept struggling sometimes, but he knew that once, when he needed it most, someone had heard him. Not the comedy, not the performance, him. Dean Martin kept being Dean Martin, smooth, cool, seemingly effortless. But those who knew him understood that beneath the entertainer was someone who paid attention, who valued people over show business, who understood that sometimes the most important thing is just being there when someone whispers for help. The cameras never caught what Winters said that night. The microphones never picked it up. The audience never knew. But Dean heard it, and that was enough. If this story of friendship and recognition moved you, subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to know that asking for help is strength, not weakness. Have you ever had someone hear you when you needed it most? Tell us in the comments, and turn on notifications for more stories about the moments that remind us what really matters.